Hi folks, this is Wingman. Today we're going to be doing a video on a series that I want to call Knives of Our Fathers. I'm going to talk about a knife that was given to me many years ago by my father, and that's the Schrade Old Timer 152. So come along, let's have a seat at the table and we'll do a little knife talk. I remember as a young boy growing up in Northern Maine, my dad was a lumberjack and he was also a heavy equipment mechanic for a lumber mill. And my dad was my hero, and still is to this day. And my dad would always come home, with an item, quote, from the company store, because, in order for us to go shopping, we lived in a small town of 500 people, you had to go 60, 70 miles away sometimes to go shopping. So the company store a lot of times had knives and boots and watches and all that stuff. My dad brought home this knife as a gift to me in the early 70s because I had passed my hunter safety exam and I had gotten my hunting license and I was able to go deer hunting for the first time, quote, by myself as a man. And it was his way of like saying, okay, with that hunting license comes great responsibility. You're carrying a firearm and you're going to be carrying a knife, with that, you need to act like a man and not act like a little punk kid. And he would tell me that, So whenever I see this knife, I always think of those values from Dad and what Dad used to tell me. This knife has skinned a few deer, it's gutted a few deer, it's gutted many fish. I remember my grandfather, when I was about 13, had bought me some 110 and 220 conibear traps. And my grandfather was an old French-Canadian logger. And he taught me how to run a trap line, how to trap muskrat, how to trap beaver. And a lot of those animals that I had caught, I skinned with this knife. I'm going to show it to you right now. This knife was made by Old Timer. It's the 150 or the 152, and they first released it in 1974. It ran for about 30 years straight in one capacity or another. They usually called this a modified skinner, and I used it, like I said, for gutting animals and fish. One thing I found out about the knife is that it felt really great in my hand, especially as a young guy, before they, quote, called things ergonomic. The ergonomics of this knife, just the way the sweep of the handle, the thumb ramp, the choil, and the sweep of the blade. I mean, they got it right when they designed this one. Now, Schrade made a bigger version of this as well, and it was called the Deer Slayer. But, I never had one. I'd seen them in catalogs, but this one will always have a place in my heart. It weighs in at about 4 ounces. It's real light. The scales are made out of Delrin on here, and let's bring it up close. Let's show you. What they did is they chamfered all the edges real nice around there, so it feels really good in the hand. You got about 3/4 of an inch width on the back and probably about 3/8 on the front. So you have a really nice sweep and it just fills your palm. And the way that they did the thumb ramp, they didn't put any jimping on it, but they angled it up enough to where you get a really good purchase on that knife. And they did a nice curve chamfered choil on there as well. Because especially as a bush knife, you're getting out in the woods, the last thing you want is your fingers slipping on that blade. And now all of a sudden, you have a major first aid issue out there while you're trying to skin an animal or while you're trying to gut an animal or do some sort of bushcraft or campcraft project. The knife is made out of a 1095 carbon steel, and as you can see, there's a pretty good patina on there. But with that said, that knife just holds an edge so good. You know, it's razor sharp. I've stropped it. I mean, it just is just a pleasure. And as long as I'm not abusing it, I mean, this knife just stays razor sharp. The blade is 5/32 thick, and as you can see, it runs the whole length of the knife. Now, these knives they're about 7 inches long. The blade is about 3.5 inches long. And what I liked about that blade is that it has a nice like skinning belly on it with an upsweep. So as I was skinning deer, or you know, skinning muskrats, beaver, whatever, you know, I could get in there, put my finger on the blade and just work that pelt down, and it just cleaned it up really nice. It was really good in the hand. It was almost like an extension, quote, to my finger, the way that, you know, this knife just fits right into my palm and the finger choil and the thumb ramp. It's just a real pleasure to use. Now, the sheath on this knife is a way that you can tell the date of the knife. One, it's made out of some pretty nice cowhide. And two, one way you can tell that it's an early model Schrade Old Timer is that the knife had a retaining strap here that went across the blade. Pull it up close. Now, the later production models in the late, I want to say late 80s or early 90s, up until they quit making these knives around 2004, after Schrade had long since sold off its holdings and, you know, outsourced and just basically licensed the name. They put the strap across the top to hold the knife, which probably was a better design, because as a young boy trying to slide this knife in, you know, I had to pay special care not to cut that strap off. But you know, I'll get up close. See, I did cut the sheath a little bit as a young kid. But with that said, this knife has served me well through the years. I'm getting to the age now where I'm hoping, quote, my daughter has kids soon so I can start training somebody and taking them out in the woods like my grandfather and my father did, and maybe I can pass this knife on down to them. If any of you have any stories like this, whether it be, you know, your favorite gun or pistol, your favorite knife, your favorite piece of camp gear, you know, it could have been an old camp stove, it could be anything, you know, I welcome any sort of video response. Maybe we can get a series going and some tags. I'm just going to do an open tag on this one. If anybody wants to contribute on this, I'm calling this series Knives of Our Fathers, but we can call it just Gear of Our Fathers if you want. I always welcome everybody's stories. I love to hear them, and I would love for you folks to share your stories. This is a little piece of history in my life. My dad has long since passed away. He died in 1988, but his memory lives in my heart. And every time I look at stuff like this, his memory and his legacy lives on through me. And as long as I'm alive, I'm going to carry that on to the next generation. As always, this is Wingman. I appreciate you watching my videos. Thank you so much for being a subscriber. And until the next one, folks, take care and have a safe day. This is Wingman. Have a great one.